without further ado, I will be popping into this. This being chapter 14 of Talisman of the Winds. So yeah, if you see me wandering off over here, it's because I'm looking off at another camera. Sort of. I'm not sure, because I don't even know if that's going to work. But hey, I'm live. What's the worst that could happen, right? Okay, so chapter 14, the garrison town of Helifriad. Shepakalish brought them to a place near Helifriad, a place where casual patrols from the town were not likely to find them, and they camped there until evening, when they prepared to go in. Shepakalish began to pack up the mule. You don't want to take her along, do you? Best leave her until we get back. No, that's not possible. She's such a delicate creature, you know. She'll become terribly disconsolate if she's left alone. But, young Thoughtful, do you have all the knowledge in the world, then? Of course not. But he was reminded of his dealings with the scribe Hastragal. Then consider that you have learned another small trifle. She will come with us. Thakal wondered if it might be the mule that had traveled the hidden ways and had just brought Shepakalish along, but that sounded too silly. Very shortly after a little philosophical discussion with the mule regarding packs, they stopped in to a dark place where a huge moon, larger than the natural, hung in the sky, and far off in the distance was the sound of roaring water. Another step brought them into the town, in the poorer quarter, where the houses were shoddily built of whatever scraps were handy. Shepakalish brought out a pot of paint and a brush. Where will you write first? No, this is your plan. It's for you to do at least the first one. Thakal looked around. One of the buildings had a wall that looked fairly solid, and he wrote on it, and in great bold letters, "Bitter blow the winds of Ascos." After a bit of thought, he had decided on this phrase as having the better rhythm. He stepped back and looked at the written phrase and nodded his satisfaction. They moved through the hidden ways into various parts of the city and wrote the phrase on various walls and doorways. However, while they were in the main market, Thakal had just begun writing when they heard the tramp of feet. Soldiers! These wouldn't be any foreigners hired to keep the peace, and a few coin in my hand will make me forget this whole business. Soldiers either. These would be men of the bloody Narnish, quite willing to stick a spear through someone who seemed to be doing something wrong. Thakal hurried through the phrase as much as he could, and was just putting in the last letters when he heard the tramping stop. There was a shout from across the market square. Something in the lines of, "You there! What are you up to?" He turned to see the soldiers rushing forward towards... Oh my goodness. He turned to see the soldiers rushing toward them with leveled spears, and a moment later, Shepakalish had swept them away to a starlit grassy plain. "Have you risked my hide sufficiently for the night?" asked the little man. "Could you get us into their weapon stores?" "Meaning that you want to try once more for a spear and the brisket? All right, come along." They were inside a building. That much Thakal could tell by the wooden floor. There were no windows nor open doors, and thus no light at all. Fresh flying pig guts! I should have brought a torch. Wait a minute, I believe I have something useful in my packs. There was a sound of rummaging and muttering, and then a faint glow began, and it grew in strength. As it grew, it revealed itself, coming from a device in the little man's hand. "Now, go to work." The walls were inaccessible, save for places behind stacked crates and kegs. He decided it would be best to have the message visible to whoever opened the door first. He painted the phrase across a row of stacked crates, and then turned to Shapakilish. Done. Let's be gone. One step through to a place where larger and slender people warred against each other, casting balls of flame as a man might throw a stone. One more step, and they were at their camping place. I have a notion to make this plan of ours more effective, Thuckle said, stretching his legs out toward the small fire. This plan of ours? I seem to recall that it was you that made the plan, and convinced a certain merchant to accompany you, providing transportation and the like. And I seem to recall comments on my wicked, deceitful mind. Did you want to argue as to where the blame should be placed, or did you want to hear my notion? What now? We slip into Dr. Gobnash's workroom and paint Dr. Gobnash is kind to spiders and vipers in the ancient tongue of Quandal? Now that's an even better notion than mine, providing you know the ancient tongue of Quandal. Certain things are feasible, and certain things are obvious jests. Obvious, at least, to anyone but a Bataan ox driver. I wouldn't want to attempt to go to certain places by the hidden ways, and Dr. Gobnash's workroom, while not chief on the list, is definitely on the list. Ah, well, back to the mere Bataan ox driver notion. Suppose we go back to one of the other garrison towns tonight, or tomorrow, and do as we've done in Helifrad, and perhaps another town next day, and another the day after that. Would it not seem more serious than a mere nuisance restricted to one town? It seems we will be very busy. Or it seems we will be extremely busy. Will we be allowing ourselves a little time for unimportant matters such as sleeping and eating? You want to be responsible for me going to jail? Shapakalish's brow furrowed. Now, how does one follow from the other? Simple. If I'm not kept busy, I'm likely to get into trouble. If I get into trouble, Lady Lucy will lock me up. Ah, but you've already stated that your possession of the talisman renders you immune from imprisonment. Not for the kind of trouble I can manage. Singing drunken songs at night in high praise of Lucy of the Fair Locks? I hadn't thought of that one. Well, give me some time to rest and we'll see what can be done. The commander of the Helifriad garrison has sent a message. Seditious graffiti has been appearing in the town and he is concerned. Concerned? What kind of fool is he? Have him pick out of 10 leading citizens and give them 5 lashes. If the graffiti continues, give them 10. If they still continue, hang them. The aide hesitated, jittering nervously. Well, what is it? Clearly there's more to it than from the way you're dancing about. Yes, Highness, the graffiti has... Sorry, just give me a minute here. The graffiti has also been occurring behind locked and guarded doors, such as garrison food stores, the commander's antechamber, and the like. It seems unlikely that any of the locals would have been responsible. The guards have been questioned closely, with no result. The only evidence is that, on the first night, a city patrol spotted a man, a boy, and a donkey across the market square. They disappeared before the patrol could get there, but one of the graffiti was freshly written on the wall where they had been. Despite cordoning off the area, they could find no tracks that led anywhere. I see. The king turned his head partially. Servant, summon Dr. Gobnash. He turned back to the aide. If there's any magic involved, then Dr. Gobnash will sort it out. If it's merely some kind of devious trickery, Gobnash is also the most devious and tricky person I know. Dr. Gobnash was not available, however. He had left word that he had had to leave on the king's business, but would return in 3 days' time at the outside. A certain servant, whose task it had been to inform the the king of Dr. Cavendish's departure, was given 10 lashings and reassigned from palace duty to stable duty, mucking it out. Lucy had finished decoding the message that the bird had brought, looked at it once more to be sure what it said, then rang a small bell. A servant entered. Yes, lady? Find Thokkel and request his presence before me as soon as may be. She spent a moment being proud of herself for maintaining a calm, business-as-usual expression and tone of voice until the servant was gone. Then she slapped the message down on the desk and glared at it. What kind of fool does he think I am, anyway? He hadn't even appeared to try to make himself scarce, either. Very shortly, the servant had returned. Thokkel awaits you, lady. She slipped the message into a pocket, went to the audience chamber, seated herself, and waited for Thokkel to come in. Well, she demanded, what have you got to say for yourself now? I suppose it won't do to thank you for pulling me away from a game where the dwarves' bones were seriously nipping my fingers? Why do I always have the urge to throw things at him? I've received a message from an agent in the garrison town of Tripoli. It seems someone has slipped in and painted Bitter Blow the Winds of Ascos on various walls, including the wall of the commander's outer chamber. Do you take me for a fool? Did you think I wouldn't remember your friend rescuing you from the locked dungeon? What did you hope to achieve? His smile grew a little broader. Why, to sow a little doubt and concern in the minds of Narnish's soldiers. Perhaps, at the end, make them a little more ready to listen to reason when we call to them to surrender. I see. And did it occur to you to think what might happen if you ran afoul of a patrol while you were sowing? Taking the garrison towns is a thing of importance, for certain, but it is only a prelude to the war, which will involve at least one full-scale battle. And if we don't have you and the Talisman available for that one battle, all of our hopes are well-nigh doomed. Did you think of that? He grinned again. And perhaps I might trip on a door sill and break my neck, or choke on a chicken bone, or go off to trim beards of the priests of Wardash. Everything for you is a matter of lightheartedness and carefree dancing through life, isn't it? Some of us can't join you in the dance, though, so we must hope your wild dance doesn't jostle us while we walk. Or worse still, send us sprawling on the cobbles. Lady, that was very poetic. Do you hope to flatter me enough to make me forget what I've called you for? There's no hope of that, my friend. I'm assigning you a bodyguard. Teheran and his men will watch over you. Ah, lovely Lady Lucy of the fair locks, you have such solicitude for a poor ox driver. Fair locks? What did you mean by that? Oh, Shapakale assures me that fair-haired lover is always more popular in the romantic ballads. I'll have to go study my ancestry. Perhaps I might be some long-lost prince of Batangi. You are the most arrogant, ridiculous man I have ever met. Go on, get out of here, and don't make trouble. I'll give Teheran special orders to knock you on the head if you seem to be on the way to starting another fight. She could barely prevent herself from laughing long enough for him to be removed. The lame man readjusted his grip on the crutches and swung himself into the group, entering the gate of the old city of Ascos. The man in brown. His mind shied away from that thought. He had instructed himself to do so when he had transported the two of them to a place 2 days' walk from here. He wouldn't disobey those instructions. No, even if his mind refused to think of them, tied as they were to so many other memories. He couldn't face what might happen if he disobeyed. What would happen? He no longer had the strength of will to curse the torturers of... Who had it been? They had left him lame. But the brown man... No, keep that thought away. stay with these people, most of them so happy and cheerful. Had he ever been cheerful? It seemed to him he might have been, once, long ago, before. The guards at the gate counted the people who came through this lot, though like the guards all over, were so hurried that a miscount, one too many or too few, was put down to a mistake in counting, and the party was pushed on through to make room for the next. The lame man stayed with them for a little while, then moved off quietly by himself. His instructions were to find a quiet place to sleep. To sleep. Perhaps he would sleep deeply enough to avoid the dreams. Perhaps. Tehran grinned at Thakal. Now you know my loyalty is to the Lady Lusomi. Don't bother trying to convince me or bribe me or to disobey her orders, and we'll all get along just fine. Thakal smiled in return. And you have orders to spoil all my fun? Only if it appears that the fun is becoming too destructive or dangerous. You'll knock me on the head if I start a fight in the drinking room? Worse. We'll draw swords and form a circle around you, announcing that this man is under the protection of Lady Lusomi. And mark me forever as the fellow who starts trouble and then hides behind the lady's skirts? You'd do that? Well, if nobody does anything too foolish, we won't have to find out, will we? So, when Thakal visited Shapakalish in the market, Moxitram was with him. Shapakalish, this is Moxitram, one of Lady Lusomi's men. Moxitram, this is Shapakalish, a good friend of mine. Apparently, I'm to have guards with me, whether I like it or not, and I can only hope they won't insist on sleeping in the same bed as me. None of them would like it either. I tend to kick like a mule, or so I've heard. Moxitarum grinned. Does he get as grumpy as this with everyone who tries to keep him alive? I'm sure he does. I have yet to divine whether it is a fault of the man himself or a standard attitude of all Batans. Don't let him discourage you, and don't let him gamble with you. No fear of that. He has quite a reputation with the dwarf's bones. After a scrupulously few cups of wine, Thakal made an early evening of it, back in his own bed by twilight. Shortly thereafter, Shapakalish and the mule passed through, the little man grabbing Thakal's arm on the way. One moment they appeared to be on a sandy isle barely large enough to hold the three of them. Then they were in the camping place outside of Hela Friad. I wasn't sure you'd be coming. Oh, after you as much as said to me, come by with the mule after everyone's asleep and pull me out? You can't say that. My hint was very subtle. Subtle as a hammer blow. I'm surprised your chamber wasn't lined with guards, spears leveled to catch me as I came in. But they weren't, declared Thakal triumphantly. That shows I was subtle enough. Ha! Well, shall we stand here arguing all night, or shall we get on with the job? There were no untoward incidents tonight, no near encounters with patrols, and Thakal was back in his quarters in time to sleep a bit before morning. And where have you been, Dr. Gobnash? We have a problem that could use your talents. I was delivering a little gift to the old city of Ascos, Highness. Only 4 days there and back? You know, Highness, I have other means of travel available to me. The king's brows lifted. You had someone there light beacon fires for you? No, Highness. I picked a landmark nearby and traveled there. A good part of the time was spent after our arrival pulling my passenger out of the worst effects of the journey. Passenger? You told me that? Exactly, Highness. My passenger did very nearly not survive, and I had to expend a good deal of my power to keep him alive long enough to do his task. To do the same thing with an army, or even a small troop, would be well nigh impossible. Narnish was on a new tack now, though. His task? To assassinate the Lady Lusomi? Not directly, Highness, but it will certainly discommode her. I shall keep you informed on the progress of the matter. Now, there was another problem that required my attention. These new men, Tukashin, what do you make of them? Mostly youngsters, Lord, out for a lark, thinking to be heroes. I've put them into a separate section, drilling them and training them apart from our own men. The ones that stay through the training will then be put into our main force. A lot of them have taken to the training well, partly because they know they don't dare go back. A few have left us altogether, and I fear they may become bandits in the locality. Not a good thing, Takishin. We are still barely welcome here. I know that, Lord. I've taken upon myself to send messages to the Lady Junomi, warning her of the possibility and apologizing. But, Lord? Yes? One more thing. Have you thought that Narnash might slip one or two of his own men in with orders to kill you? The Sikoman scowled. Yes, I'd thought of it. I'll be as careful as I can. I've also had a word with your own personal guards, Lord, just to make sure they're aware of the situation. You know, young Thoughtful, eventually the word of this is going to come to Dr. Gobnash, who will quite certainly begin laying traps for us. Thoughtful's head came up. I ought to have thought of that myself. Do you have any notions as to what might do that in that case? Be ready to turn and run very quickly? Thoughtful grimaced. This is the best you can think of? Better than not having thought of it at all, retorted Shopakalish. And for most things, I think it will work better than any complex scheme I might come up with. I might, indeed, work out a series of possibilities of traps and the like, then work out a series of counters to each. But I think running is the better notion. This interchange made Thoughtful nervous, but after they'd paid their visits to the three garrison towns, he began to relax. They sighted one town patrol, but far enough distance to be of no real concern. The most interesting occurrence, in fact, came at the very tail end of the night, when they came into a better off quarter of the town, when they had put their slogan once before. Most of the walls here were neat, well kept, and solid, an ideal surface for writing on. Look at that! Their earlier depredation had been scraped off and painted over. However, on top of that, someone had written recently, "Biter blow the winds of Ascos." And don't tell me they left it there from last time either. I don't make errors like that, even in a great rush. And this means somewhat important, does it? It means, Thoughtful calmed his voice, it means, as you very well know, you little rascal, that someone, at least, is joining us in our endeavor, which might be a little more than assistance to our cause. It would even be better if they would spell correctly. Ah, and now Thoughtful, having lately learned to tell one letter from another, has taken on the task of criticism of every written word? Perhaps not, but Thoughtful has a feeling we've been standing around here nattering for too long. Thoughtful messages continue to come in to say that this graffiti writing is still going on, and also that much of it seems to be in the same hand, though my agents have not been able to view more than a few samples without seeming conspicuous. Furthermore, everyone has noticed that you're going to bed early and rising very late, often still tired. Since we know your small friend can slip you out of your quarters with no one the wiser, I must consider using other measures. What will you do? Have Taran chain me to my bedpost every night? No, that might be excessive. Perhaps only the guard inside your room rather than outside. Might I ask a question, though, O Lady Lucy of the Fair Locks? She glowered at him. What question is that? Do your agents mention any effects these graffiti might be having? The soldiers are a little nervous, but not to the point of surrendering to anyone who comes against them. All the more reason to not stop now. See? They know the people don't like them. A little scribbling on the walls just reminds them of that. But when the slogan turns up in locked rooms, which the local people couldn't get into, it makes them sure things other than local unrest are at work here. And further, it reminds them of the stories they've likely heard of that battle last year when I used the Talisman. If we begin the season by summoning them to surrender lest the winds of Ascos blow, don't you think it would hinder their will to fight? At least hinder their will to fight? I hate to dampen your eagerness, but I've already told you that if some soldier gets lucky and puts a spear through you while you're painting the walls, we could lose you and the use of the Talisman. And if we lose that, we might well have lost the war. Lady, any number of things might happen to me to lose you the use of that Talisman. Will protecting me like a toddling child really have the proper effect? She looked at him, and then her eyes widened suddenly, as if she were seeing him for the first time. Anything I try to do to keep you safe merely pushes you harder to take risks, doesn't it? Not at all, he protested automatically. And then he stopped. You know, he said slowly, there's a lot of truth in that. I see. So even if I put a guard inside your room, you'll find some way to evade him, won't you? Does a mere ox driver dare disagree with Lady Lucy, fair queen of all Ascos? If that ox driver is a Bataan named Thakkel, he will dare pretty much at whatever he wishes, and he'll even make some silly joke and grin as the headman takes his head. This would not be, of course, until after I've won your battles for you. Ah, the misfortunate Thakkel. There, just like that. Wordash Garden Guide. What kind of word is misfortunate? Oh, back when I was in jail awaiting your displeasure, I saw that someone had scratched that on the wall. Here stood the misfortunate Minorio. The word caught my fancy, perhaps because it doesn't exist. Now we're drifting away from the matter at hand. The more carefully I try to protect you, the more determined you are to evade the protection, and you'll take greater and greater risks as you do so. Perhaps we could come to some kind of accommodation? What kind of accommodation? You speak as warily as if I were Bloody Narnish himself, offering you a special cup of wine. My offer is simply this. Go, do as you will do, and try not to risk yourself too unduly, and at least take one of Tehran's men with you. Do you really think one extra man is going to make any difference at all? Probably not, but it'll ease my mind at least a little. Just take him along, no stipulation about following his advice? Would it do any good? I only ask, not demand, mind you, that you not reject any advice out of hand. For my own part, I would agree. I will have to consult my partner, though. Another man, would you like to just take along some jugglers and a musical troupe? You said you could take 30. This is only 3, plus the mule. And 4 of us will fit so well into those crannies behind the locked doors where you insist on going. Thakkel sighed. We must make allowances. I prefer not to upset the Lady Lucy, and not to give me any snickering about young love and that nonsense. I'd just as soon not come up to the campaigning season with her treating me like some sort of necessary evil. We still have to fight Narnish. So, the little man shrugged. I suppose the only thing to say is, bring in the guard so we can show them what the hidden ways are like. And that is chapter 14. Take care, and I'll see you soon.